Very warm welcome to BBC News, broadcasting to our viewers in North America and around the globe. My name is Mike Embley. Our top stories. Reports from the Philippines say more than 30 people have died in an attack on a crowded casino in Manila. Storm clouds gather as President Trump withdraws the United States from the Paris Accord on climate change.
So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair.
From within the US and around the world, widespread condemnation. Climate experts warn of deadly consequences for the environment. And celebrating one of the great masters of the Renaissance, the drawings of Raphael go on show to rave reviews here in the UK. Hello, but first, as we go on air, it's being reported that 34 people have died at a casino in Manila, capital of the Philippines. Local TV is quoting fire protection services, saying most died from suffocation. Our reporter Sarah Corker is here in the studio. Sarah, this is a story we've been reporting for a couple of hours. It seemed to be settling down. It seemed there'd been a gunman there, and there's no indication at first that many people had died, as now seems evident.
Yes, well, let's just look at the timeline of events, exactly what happened. It was early on Friday morning, local time, when gunshots were fired. We've seen chaotic scenes of hundreds of guests and employees trying to escape this hotel complex, which is quite near to Manila's international airport. Now, security forces, they were quickly on the scene and they were heavily armed. And what they said was one masked gunman burst into this crowded casino, firing shots and then setting fire to gaming tables. The police chief then said that this gunman was putting these casino gaming chips into a bag. Later, there was this huge manhunt for him because he went missing, no one could find him. And police later said that he had killed himself, he'd set himself on fire. Earlier in the evening, President Trump had actually tweeted saying his thoughts were with all those caught up in this incident, and he described it as a terrorist incident. The police, though, in Manila have been very clear that they believe that this wasn't terror-related. They've, in fact, said that it was a burglary gone wrong. So some confusing reports coming out.
And the suggestion isn't that the gunman, that the attacker, killed all these people?
No, what the police have said and what the fire service have been saying is that most of those injured and killed suffered the effects of smoke inhalation, breathing in the fumes and the smoke from that fire. Also, we've had reports from the local hospital that people suffered broken bones, that others were trying to jump out of windows to escape from this, and that it was the stampede of people trying to get out of the complex that did injure a lot of people. The death toll, unfortunately, seems to be going up as the hours go on, as dawn breaks almost. The latest figure we have, as you mentioned, the fire service have said that 34 bodies were found on the second and third floor. Police have said at least 50 people injured. But reports we do have said that the gunman was shooting windows and up in the ceiling, that he didn't shoot any people.
All right, Sarah, thank you very much. Stay with us if you can. I think we can go there live now. We can speak to Rafi Santos, journalist with ABS-CBN in Manila. Rafi, thanks very much for coming through to us. You must be very busy. Tell us the latest.
Oh, yes, we are now, the police are conducting follow-up operations on the suspect in the Resorts World shooting. They have identified the suspect but have yet to divulge his name and his details pending the follow-up operation. What we do now for certain is that, according to the police, that he was acting alone during the incident. Which has killed so far, according to the Bureau of Fire Protection, they have found 34 bodies inside the Resorts World Casino on the second and the third floor of that particular building. No specifics yet on whether these are casualties, that these are people who are dead. They're just trying to verify if these people need resuscitation and need to get to the hospital, to the nearest hospital. But as of 10:30, the BFP told us that they saw 24 on the second floor and 10 bodies on the third floor. Now, according to the police, there are also 50 people injured, and 18 of them are now confined in local hospitals. At the moment, police have recovered 2 firearms from the suspect, one M4 assault rifle and a .38 caliber pistol. and that they are now processing. According to the police, the suspect apparently shot himself when he was cornered by a responding police unit at around 7 a.m. today, and his body was charred. It was burned because apparently he lit the room he was in on fire. So details are emerging now. We are not yet sure if there are more bodies inside, as the Bureau of Fire Protection is still sweeping or clearing all those floors, because the suspect actually lit the casino tables in some of the rooms afire at around 12 early in the morning here, 12:30 in the morning, and he set these 3 floors on fire, according to the police. So still very thick smoke there. We have yet to get further details from the Bureau of Fire Protection, but according to the police, they now have a lead that they're following, and then they will get back to us in a couple of hours to see if the follow-up operation is successful. Back to you.
Rafi, any more details from your sources on the motive for the attack and how these people came to die? At first, we were reporting, that hundreds of people had fled the gunman. There was no suggestion early on this incident was so serious.
Yes. If you ask the police commanders here, according to the police, the gunman was acting alone, and apparently he was motivated. He was trying to rob the casino, according to the police. He was trying to rob the casino, and he brought with him an assault rifle, got off on the second floor of the building around 11:30 in the morning, and it started opening fire on the second floor of the building where the casino floor is. Apparently, he did not, according to witnesses, he did not shoot at the casino, the players or people inside the casino. He was just shooting at the doors and went straight for the locked box of the casino, where he stole, according to police, he tried to steal 130 million pesos worth of casino chips. So right now, the motivation, according to the police, is they're looking at this as a simple case of robbery, of trying to rob the casino, and no links to any terrorist groups so far as of the moment, but those things could change depending on the follow-up operations that the police are conducting, because the police have found the car which the suspect used, and he parked it on the second floor of the building, and now they have apparently found some clues there, and that they're trying to follow those leads, which may lead to a further clarification on what really motivated the suspect.
Okay, Rafi, thank you very much indeed for that. Now, we'll bring you more on that, of course, as soon as we have it. But let's move on for the moment to the other main story that's been moving in the past few hours. World leaders have reacted with alarm to President Trump's announcement that he's pulling out of the Paris Accord, the biggest international agreement ever drawn up to combat climate change. It was signed by 195 nations. The US is the world's biggest polluter per head of population. Until now, it's also been the largest donor and supporter of other countries struggling with the impact of a rapidly warming planet. Mr. Trump said the treaty imposed unfair economic burdens on the US. Nick Bryant reports.
The White House Rose Garden, the most fragrant of settings for what environmentalists will see as a toxic presidential decision. One that directly affects ecosystems all over the planet, from Donald Trump's back lawn to the mightiest of oceans and ice sheets.
In order to fulfill my solemn duty to protect America and its citizens, the United States will withdraw from the Paris Climate Accord.
He slammed this global agreement, a legacy of his predecessor Barack Obama, claiming it gave China and other countries an unfair competitive advantage and penalized American workers.
Thank you.
From its first word to its last, this was an America First address.
This agreement is less about the climate and more about other countries gaining a financial advantage over the United States. The rest of the world applauded when we signed the Paris Agreement. They went wild. They were so happy. For the simple reason that it put our country, the United States of America, which we all love, at a very, very big economic disadvantage. At what point does America get demeaned? At what point do they start laughing at us as a country? We want fair treatment for its citizens, and we want fair treatment for our taxpayers. We don't want other leaders and other countries laughing at us anymore, and they won't be. They won't be. I was elected to represent the citizens of Pittsburgh, not Paris.
For Donald Trump, it's all about the art of the deal. And he said he wants to negotiate a better one for America. But he didn't seem that worried if the rest of the world doesn't agree to one.
In negotiations to re-enter either the Paris Accord or in really entirely new transaction on terms that are fair to the United States, its businesses, its workers, its people, its taxpayers. So we're getting out, but we will start to negotiate, and we will see if we can make a deal that's fair. And if we can, that's great. And if we can't, that's fine.
Climate change is an American problem too. Just visit Florida, a picturesque front line in the fight against global warming. Rising sea levels and recurring flooding risks turning Miami Beach into a modern-day Atlantis, a city submerged by water. Even on sunny days, it can get inundated because seasonal king tides bring the ocean to people's doorsteps. And further up the coast is Mar-a-Lago, the president's luxury estate. It's estimated that over the coming decades, a quarter of it could be underwater.
Miami Beach is going to disappear.
No wonder local residents such as Dan Kipnis are alarmed.
Our so-called president thinks it's a hoax. It's a Chinese hoax. I mean, I can't believe it. I live right in the middle of climate change every day. We are so affected here. How dare the leader of this great country say it doesn't exist?
Travel to the Midwest coal and rust belt and you get a very different view. Amongst many of Donald Trump's working-class supporters, the Paris Agreement is seen as a killer of American jobs. But head further west to California, a state that's long set the pace on green issues in America, and you'll find a Democratic governor who's promised to conduct his own climate change negotiations with President Xi of China.
President Trump has gone AWOL, absent without leave, and now it's up to Xi, and California will work with him and work with other countries to do everything we can to offset the negative pathway chosen by President Trump.
This is a decision of enormous planetary and geopolitical significance. Critics will claim America has abdicated leadership on arguably the world's biggest problem, that America first means America alone. Nick Bryant, BBC News, Washington.
Well, there was immediate and widespread condemnation. A statement from the European Union called it a sad day for the world. The German, Italian and French governments denied any suggestion the deal could be renegotiated. President Macron said it was irreversible, and he said America had turned its back on the world.
Nous ne renégocierons pas un accord moins.
Under no circumstances will we renegotiate a less ambitious agreement. France is calling on all countries who are signatories to remain within the Paris Agreement, to be worthy of our responsibilities and to give nothing up.
À tous les scientifiques, ingénieurs.
To all the scientists, engineers, entrepreneurs, responsible citizens who were disappointed by the United States President's decision, I want to say this. You will find a second home in France. I'm calling on you, come and work here with us. Work on concrete solutions for the climate. Tonight the United States has turned its back on the world, but France will not turn its back on the Americans.
President Macron also said in English, we think for emphasis that the process of trying to mitigate the effects of climate change would go on. He said there's no plan B because there is no planet B. Let's go live to Daniel Bodansky. He's Professor of Environmental Law at Arizona State University. Professor, thank you for your time. As I understand it, there was a quick way for the US to pull out of the convention, of the accord. That's not the route that President Trump has taken. This could take years, couldn't it? So this process he started will finish after his term in office. He might still be president. Another president might have a different idea.
That's exactly right. He could have withdrawn from the Framework Convention on Climate Change, which would have withdrawn the U.S. from Paris within a year. Instead, he's withdrawing pursuant to the Paris Agreement itself, which means he can't even give notice about withdrawal for 3 years after its entry into force. That's November 2019, and it doesn't come into effect until November 2020.
But do you expect it still to have an impact, the withdrawal?
Oh, it'll have a tremendous impact. It's a real blow to international cooperation on climate change. It's a slap in the face at the rest of the international community, which spent 4 really difficult years trying to come up with an agreement that was fair to everyone.
And is it possible that US withdrawal will lead to a collapse of the agreement? And if so, what would be the consequences of that?
I think it's too early to say. It looks unlikely that it will lead to a collapse of the agreement. The reaction of other countries is that they're going to press ahead even without the U.S. And I think a lot of countries are hoping that in 3 years' time after the next election, the U.S. will re-engage with Paris. So I think saying that this is going to cause the collapse of the Paris Agreement is really premature. If the Paris Agreement were to collapse, it would be a huge setback because the Paris Agreement sets the architecture for international cooperation to address the problem.
And within the US, there are already strong moves, aren't there, towards alternative energy, energy conservation, against the high carbon economy by individual states and cities and American companies. I think the mayors of 61 American cities already said they will abide by their obligations under the accord, including Pittsburgh, which Mr. Trump mentioned specifically.
There's a lot of support in the U.S. for dealing with climate change. Most Americans think climate change is real. There was a lot of support for the Paris Agreement. So I think there will be action going forward in the U.S. by states of the U.S., cities, businesses. But I think with the U.S. Out of Paris, and if it rolls back the domestic regulation, it will make it harder for the U.S. to really achieve as big a reductions as it could have.
Professor, what do you say to President Trump's argument that the deal was unfair, that the US was too heavily burdened with reducing emissions? Countries such as India and China got a much easier deal. There are plenty of people supporting him who feel the same.
Well, I think that's a really unfair criticism of the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement was structured to be super flexible, to allow each country to decide for itself what it wants to do to reduce greenhouse gas emissions. And so the U.S. chose its target voluntarily after an assessment of what the U.S. could reasonably achieve at a relatively low economic cost. So this was not imposed on the U.S. The U.S. took its target after careful study. And it was an agreement that was structured, I think, to try to create a level playing field so that everyone in the world would be engaged on the climate change issue. And it's the first international agreement that does have that very, very wide international buy-in.
Professor Bodansky, thank you.
Thank you very much.
And you can get much more on the reaction to President Trump's decision, plus full details on the science of climate change and the Paris Accord itself on our website. Just go to bbc.com/news and follow the links. Much more to come on BBC News, including this. We talked to one of the surgeons who treated many of the young victims of the Manchester bombing. Good to have you with us on BBC News. The latest headlines this hour. Reports from the Philippines say at least 34 people have died after an attack on a crowded casino in Manila. President Trump has said he is pulling the United States out of the Paris Climate Accord. He's called it an unfair agreement that would cost millions of American jobs. A surgeon who operated on many young victims of last week's Manchester bombing has said the injuries he saw were like those sustained in war zones. Dr. Ibrah Majid, who works at Royal Manchester Children's Hospital, said he was angry that a man who claimed to share his Muslim faith could have carried out such an attack. He spoke to Martin Bashir.
It was the front line in treating the youngest victims, and soon welcomed the Queen, who offered support and comfort.
Quickly.
The Royal Manchester Children's Hospital has won widespread praise for its response to the bomb attack, and leading the team of surgeons that night was Dr. Ibrah Majid, the head of trauma and orthopaedic surgery.
What we saw was essentially war wounds.
War wounds?
Yes, so the kind of wounds you would see on a battlefield. We were operating from probably about 1 o'clock in the morning all the way to just before 8 o'clock. Once they'd stabilized the children, then there was a pecking order of what needed to be done. So the life-saving surgery had to be done before the limb-saving surgery.
And were there several children where there would be multiple surgeries?
Yes, and even to this day we're continuing to operate on some children, and some of these children will continue to need surgeries going into the next week.
Had you lost any patients?
Fortunately, that night in theatre, we didn't lose any patients.
He would oversee 3 operating theatres, managing a team of nurses and consultants. The clinical challenge for Dr. Majid was only compounded by the knowledge that the attacker claimed to be a Muslim.
I don't understand how somebody who professes to have that same faith has such a discordant view of life.
How do you feel about individuals who claim to be Muslims and do this kind of thing?
I can understand why people are angry. I'm angry. I'm angry that someone would do this to children, mainly in our city.
After 8 hours of non-stop surgery, he finally went home to his family.
What did you tell your wife when you got home?
I couldn't really talk to her much at all. I just explained to her that I think the words I used were, it was horrific. And I said I needed to rest, and I just went upstairs. I slept for about 2 hours. I was woken by my son, who'd just come back from nursery, and I can remember giving him the biggest hug I've ever given him. Having operated on children all night with life and limb-threatening injuries, I cherished any moment with him more than I ever have.
A dark night for the medical community, but the darkness did not overcome them. Martin Bashir, BBC News, Manchester.
Just briefly, one item of other news. President Trump has decided to delay his hugely controversial suggestion of moving the US Embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He says to improve the chances of negotiating a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. The Israeli government has said it's disappointed. The Italian artist Raphael, one of the great masters of the Renaissance, is being celebrated at a new exhibition here in the UK. Experts say it is a once-in-a-lifetime experience. It brings together 120 works from collections around the world. Our arts editor Will Gompertz has been to Oxford's Ashmolean Museum.
The Transfiguration by Raphael, who died when only 37 years old, this being his last masterpiece, confirmation of a supreme talent with a reputation for clarity and control. But that is superficial. Beneath the surface lies another Raphael, a surprisingly experimental artist who could draw with the freedom and expressiveness of a jazz musician.
What we see here is he's moving away from the kinds of traditions that he's inherited. So he's trying to infuse this very traditional image of the Madonna and Child with a real tenderness, a real human sympathy and naturalism. And it's that element of human sympathy that makes Raphael different, that shows us where he's going. And it's through drawing that he can explore this kind of expressiveness. This is an amazing drawing. It shows Raphael in an absolute burst of brainstorming creativity, madly drawing with the pen. It's hugely adventurous, hugely febrile. It's like a volcano. There's all this energy in the drawing going on. He's chasing his thoughts on paper really, really fast.
It's messy.
It's very messy.
With these drawings of Raphael's, do we meet a different artist than the one we maybe think we know from the painting? Somebody who's much more emotional, much more experimental?
I think that's absolutely right. He's very, very expressive in these drawings and often very adventurous in the way that he is using drawing as a way of conveying emotion. And here we really do see him exploring quite profound emotions in the drawings and creating forms that are moving, that are deeply moving. When I saw these drawings coming out of their crates as they arrived for the exhibition installation, you know, I was moved to tears at times. I mean, that's the magic of the drawing.
Raphael gave this picture to his contemporary, the German artist Albrecht Dürer, to show he too could draw like a master. An assertion visitors to this exhibition are unlikely to contest. Will Gompertz, BBC News.
And just briefly, that breaking news at this hour, just a reminder, reports from the Philippines are saying at least 34 people have died after an attack on a crowded casino resort in Manila. Most of them, it seems, died of suffocation after a fire. Now, this was a story that was developing over the past few hours. It ended tragically. We'd heard that hundreds of people have fled an attack by a gunman, at first thought to be terror-related. Then the authorities said it was robbery. It seems the gunman fired shots and then set gaming tables alight before killing himself. That sparked panic at the resort. Hundreds of people did flee, but it seems that many people were trapped. That's it for now.